Delighted to have Dr. Tony Walker from the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute. Tony's career has enabled him to work in a variety of education-based roles. He's been a teacher, a school counselor, a therapist, an administrator, and most recently a senior school system leader. Today, he's here to talk to us about how to be strong allies for LGBTQ+ youth. Please welcome Dr. Tony Walker.
One, two, three, four, five, six. 6 kids. According to research published by the Journal of Adolescent Medicine in 2019, 6 LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer kids will die by suicide every single day. That's 6 today, 6 yesterday, 6 tomorrow. Soon, as the numbers add up, we're at thousands per year. You can do something to help. I'm Dr. Tony Walker, Senior Director of Strategic Education Initiatives with the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute. To start, I'm going to take you back about 20 years. It's 1998. A young gay college student enrolled at the University of Wyoming goes out to a local pub for a night of fun. That night, he's lured into a car by 2 straight men, driven out to the middle of nowhere, tied to a fence, brutally beaten, tortured, and left to die. His name, Matthew Shepard. Now, just a couple of years later, picture me, a high school student, recently come out at 16 years old, the only out gay person in my very Midwestern school of about 3,000 students. It was fun, let me tell you. You know, I saw myself in Matthew Shepard. I knew what had happened to him and so many other gay men could happen to me, and I wanted to do something about it. So in my political science class that year in high school, I thought I might have a small, albeit some might say silly, way to use my voice for him. You see, we had this project where we were learning about the legislative process, how laws were made. And as part of our project, we each had to design and draft a bill and then bring it before Congress, aka our political science class. And then all of us would vote on whether or not it became a law. I knew right away what I wanted my bill to be. I wanted to extend the definition of a federal hate crime to include LGBTQ people. You see, at the time, the definition of a hate crime was limited to attacks that were motivated by race, religion, or national origin, and they didn't include crimes motivated by sexual orientation or gender identity. So I thought this was just a common sense ad. So the moment came and I pitched my bill. I had done so much work behind the scenes on this. I knew exactly what to say, how to pitch it, and I thought I executed the delivery perfectly. But crickets. And then, well, I'll skip the gory details, the laughter and the muttered hate speech I heard under a few of my classmates' breath, and I'll skip ahead to the vote. My political science teacher sat there in stunned silence, not saying a word, while my class voted against my bill and laughed at me as I sat shocked that nobody understood why this was important. Now, it wasn't just the vote that got me. It actually was my teacher's silence and, candidly, the silence of a few of my friends that were also in the class. Now, I've got to tell you that instantly, and probably for the rest of that school year, I couldn't have cared less about political science. I didn't feel safe anymore in that classroom. And I probably scooted by with a C average without much trying, and I sure tried to skip the class as much as I could. And listen, we know that isn't shocking, right? Because LGBTQ kids are 3 times more likely to miss school for this exact type of reason. About 1/3 of all LGBT kids miss school every single month. And those numbers skyrocket by 3 times after an incident of harassment or discrimination or bullying occurs. Today, more than half of LGBTQ kids say that they don't bother reporting when harassment or discrimination or bullying happens in the first place. Why? Because they don't think that school staff will do anything about it. And maybe what's more frightening is that for those who are courageous enough to report it, more than half, 60% of those kids say that nothing ever happens. There's no intervention, and most of the time they're just told, buck up and ignore it. It's got to change. So back to my story. So the next day, I'm walking down the hallway, and here comes that kid. You know, there's always one, and it was him, and he was like the ringleader from my political science class that was causing all the ruckus. And as he walks by, he screams some profanity-laced threat that basically says, if you don't shut up, you're going to end up in the trash can just like your stupid bill. Now, while I have to give him kudos for like referencing the legislative process while also threatening me, I wasn't alone. LGBTQ kids across the country, even now, regularly report that type of harassment, intimidation, and threats. In fact, it's the vast majority of them, over 86%. And more than 1/4 of LGBTQ kids report that they are physically assaulted every single school year. That day, I was lucky because I was the type of student who was involved in lots of different clubs and activities. I was kind of all over the place. And it just so happened, in that process, I became friends with a lot of the really popular, really pretty girls that were in my class. And there was one of them walking next to me that day. So she stood up for me in a time when I hadn't yet found my own power. And I won't repeat what she said here, but suffice it to say, that kid never gave me a problem again. Friends, and in this case, a bystander, and social support. Those were my protective factors, my insulation. A few friends who had social capital, who publicly accepted me, plus a supportive family at home. Plus, I had one teacher who had the courage to come out to me in confidence that I began to view as a mentor, because at the time, I didn't know any other gay people in my life. Some combination of those 3 things got me through that time and helped me to find my pride. You know, supportive family, it's never lost on me how lucky I am to have a supportive family. According to research out of the University of Chicago that's brand new, LGBTQ kids are 120% more likely to be homeless. They make up 40% of the entire child homeless population. Almost half of all homeless kids are LGBTQ. Despite being, maybe 7 to 10% of the general population. It's got to change. So from that moment on, I decided, you know what, I'm going to embrace this role of being the sole gay, the token gay guy at my school. I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to do something about it. And in my situation, I was determined I was going to teach these kids what was up. And so I've tried to spend the rest of my life doing that, and there have been some victories along the way. Back in high school, I started an advocacy organization. I started our first Gay Straight Alliance, a GSA, and I even took a boy to prom. And let me tell you real quick, it was mortifying because in my school, we all had to take, it was like mandatory prom pictures when you walked in the door with your date. So I take my prom picture, and then a couple of days later, the school put together this booklet that they passed out to all the juniors and seniors in my high school. And so, of course, I knew everybody was like looking at my picture because, hello, I was there with a boy, and I was the only one. And so I flipped to my picture, and dang it, if my eyes weren't closed in my picture, I was mortified. I knew everybody was looking at it. I grew up later in life to eventually become a senior school district leader and build out support programs for all kinds of kids. One that I'm really proud of is being one of the first school systems in the nation to run the Out for Safe Schools program at every single school in our network. Pretty cool. And by the way, that law, that bill that I dreamed up back in high school, well, that did become federal law back in 2009, thanks to the hard work and advocacy of Matthew Shepard's parents. I was just 9 years too early. I share a little of my experience because I think that it mirrors the experience of so many millions of LGBTQ kids out there. And while I wish I could say that a lot has changed in 20 plus years, I'm not sure that it really has. Some things have changed. There have been some victories, but there's still a long way to go. For example, we know that LGBTQ kids are still 2 to 4 times more likely to commit suicide than their peers. And recent research out of the Trevor Project indicates that 40%, again, almost half of all LGBTQ kids seriously contemplated suicide in the past 12 months. Almost half. LGBTQ kids are 6 times more likely to experience depression, 3 times more likely to use substances. GLSEN, a national organization, does a school climate survey every year. Their last one was in 2019. And in that survey, they found that the vast majority of kids, almost all of them, still report hearing the word gay used in a derogatory way, and they report hate speech used on an almost daily basis. At least half of LGBTQ kids are cyberbullied. We also know that location matters. The majority of discrimination, bullying, and hate speech towards LGBTQ kids happens in the South and in rural areas. And it's those same areas that are the least likely to have supportive programs in place to protect students. It's got to change. But here's the good news. It can change. Today, if you want it to. And you're part of the solution. People ask me all the time, what can you do? And I actually think that you can boil down the answer to just a few words. Show up and speak up. Show up, speak up. And here's a few specific ways that you can do that. One of the most important is adult connection and support. Look for the LGBTQ kids in your life. No matter what role you're in, look for them and intentionally build relationships with them. Whether they act like they want it or not, they need you. Get to know them, and let's help ditch the stereotypes about LGBTQ people. Quick story, just to illustrate my point. Back when I was in high school, I was finally a senior. I had really embraced my inner gay man. And, I thought I was like the king of the school. So I'm walking down the hall one day. These 2 freshman girls, cute as a butt, they run up. Oh my God, you're Tony Walker. And I said, yeah, it is I am Tony. Yes. Tony, what do you think of our outfits? And I said, girls, listen, let's talk about stereotypes. Just because I'm a gay man does not mean that I am a fashion expert. That's a stereotype. And I looked really disappointed, and I said, but by the way, Those outfits are awful. Polka dots? Really? That was so last year. I'm just kidding. I love polka dots, and I told them that too. Stereotypes. We got to overcome stereotypes. Small, visible cues of support. Trust me when I tell you that your LGBTQ kids are looking for those little signals that you care. Maybe that's a rainbow sticker somewhere in your classroom. Maybe it's on your laptop. Maybe it's a rainbow lanyard that you wear around your neck with your school ID badge. LGBTQ kids, they notice it. It will make them feel safe when they see it. Safe space programs. They're a great way to kind of operationalize that formally if that's of interest to you. Look them up, safe space. Also, you can display your pronouns. He, him, his, right? That's my gender identity. You can put those in your email signature, on the chalkboard, in your bio. You can put your pronouns wherever you want. Why it matters is because members of the LGBTQ community will see, wow, this person gets it. At least they're trying to understand, and they're supportive. They're a safe place for me. So use your pronouns. And on that note, let's just acknowledge collectively that LGBTQAI+, there's a lot of letters. It's alphabet soup. We know that, okay? Try to learn the terms. Terminology matters. Words matter. It's important. But also, you're not going to get it all right away. I don't get it all right. That's okay. What's more important is that you try, and that if there's something that you legitimately don't understand or have a question, it is always better to ask that individual that you're working with, hey, like, how do you want me to refer to this? What makes you the most safe? What makes you feel the most supported and comfortable? Let them decide. But research the terms. Next, intervene. Every time. All the time. Intervene. When you see harassment, discrimination, bullying, you've got to do it. You can do this in a lot of ways. You can address it at the beginning of the school year, have a conversation when you're setting expectations for your classroom or your office space. Make it part of the conversation. You can have classroom resets if you notice that there's a problem, address it in a new quarter, new semester. But if you see something happening real time, you've got to jump in. And this is intimidating, I hear, to a lot of teachers. But you know, it doesn't have to be a big dramatic thing. You can literally walk over if you hear something happening in the hallway, and you can make it about you. That's a great way to diffuse a situation. Make it about you. You know, wow, I hear some words that really hurt me. I don't allow those type of words in this space because I want everyone to feel supported and included here. And then the really important thing, though, is to then follow up with those individuals. And so you have a follow-up one-on-one conversation with the person who said the words. You have a follow-up conversation with the person who is the victim. And it's heartfelt because that's where real change happens, I think. And if you suspect that bullying is happening, well, guess what? In Texas, bullying is illegal. And your school will have procedures that they have to follow. So if you suspect that bullying is happening, report it. But don't be afraid to jump in. Your LGBTQ kids are counting on you to do it. Next, tolerance and equity programming. It can help. There's a lot of research out there that supports that when schools run these types of programs, it makes a difference. Some of them, teaching tolerance. There's one called Owning Up, written by Rosalind Wiseman, who's a New York Times bestselling author. It's really good. Safe space programs, like I mentioned, gay straight alliances, GSAs. There's so much research out there that supports when schools implement these programs, there's really positive results. Academics go up, attendance goes up, engagement goes up, hate language, derogatory language goes down. The things that you would hope would happen. There's actually some really interesting research out there about GSAs, gay straight alliances, that schools that have a GSA, they've done longitudinal studies where now they followed kids through their college years. And college students perform better, more engagement, higher GPAs, higher rates of persistence in college, just by going to a school that had a GSA. They didn't even have to participate in it. Just by your school having one guarantees better outcomes for all kids. I think that's saying something. And finally, organizational policy. Very specific policy. And I'm not necessarily talking about some big, robust, complex thing that's standalone. If you have that, great, that's awesome. But it can be as small as a few select words added to existing policy that offers protection to your disenfranchised populations, your minority communities, including LGBTQ. Naming it, words have power. You are safe here, and we will protect you. And we will do something about it if you are treated badly. It matters. What's sad about this is that the number of schools with these kinds of policies has largely stayed flat since 2011. And what's really disappointing about that is that the frequency of harassment and that derogatory language goes down when these policies are in place, and staff are more likely to step in and intervene when they exist. So ask about those policies, or if you're a decision maker, think about it. You know, as I've gotten older, I've realized that to me, pride is so much more than just a word that conveys how I feel about being gay. It's a collective badge of honor that I've earned by coming out multiple times a day, every day for years, and never really knowing how you're going to be received when you do. It's the wins and it's the losses and the courage to just face the next unknown. But that shield doesn't form overnight, and our kids are the ones that often need our support the most. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know about you, but that count is locked in my head and will be locked in my heart every day until we make a change. But the good news is that we've never been better positioned to help, and that gives me an awful lot of hope. Together we can make kids feel safe, and together we can make sure that everyone feels like they belong. This is the time. They need us, and it starts with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, for those words of wisdom and your story. We appreciate it very much. For the final presentation for today, we are delighted to have Maria Johnson from the UT Dallas Center for Brain Health. The work they are doing there is phenomenal and has significant applications for all of us who live or work with adolescents. Maria is here today to talk with us about brain health and the power of connection. Maria, welcome.
Wow, it's bright up here. So before I get started with my slides today, I know that maybe during the cookie break, we started checking our phones, seeing how many emails have come through today. Maybe we've gotten some notifications from social media. Maybe we've been worrying about our caseloads, our students, our kids. I, for one, have a 15-year-old and a 10-year-old, and my 15-year-old took a mental health day today, and that kind of, gave me a break too, so I could be present. So many times in our lives, our brains are pulled in so many different directions, and we don't really have the coping tools to be able to refocus and refresh. So today, before I get started on my talk, I'd love to refresh with you. So if you could all close your eyes for just a moment. I'd like you to focus on the sound of my voice. I'd like you to take your hand and to place it over your heart. Now, I would like you to think of someone close to you. It could be a parent, it could be a student, a family member, a significant other, a pet, someone or something that you care about. And as you're thinking of this person or thing, I'd love for you to imagine a positive experience that you've had with that person or thing. What joy have they brought to your life? And just take a moment and embrace the feelings that come over you as you think about this person or thing. Now I'd like you to take a deep breath in and slowly exhale. Now you can open your eyes as you're ready. Reorient yourself to the space and feel refreshed. I love opening up talks with this exercise because it really allows us to not only be in the moment, but to also be connected. And today, I'm going to be talking to you about the power of connection and brain health. When was the last time that you thought about your brain health? Well, we have 125 scientists, psychologists, clinicians, neurospecialists that are working together at the Center for Brain Health to translate research into actionable tools and strategies and programming that can get out into the community. Now, in the research world, oftentimes we can conduct a study and it takes years for that study to get published. And then it gets published in this fancy journal and it sits on a shelf in a library somewhere. And we rarely reap the benefits. And when we do, it's typically 10 to 20 years after the research was done. That's crazy, right? And so the Center for Brain Health has really been about how can we conduct this research and empower our communities to take charge of their brains. You are in the driver's seat, every single one of you. And we want to empower our students to believe this in themselves. They are the neuroarchitects of their own brains. How cool is that? Our experiences, our thoughts, our feelings, our relationships help create how our brain functions best. So today I'm so thrilled to be here to talk to you and to share with you some tools that have been developed from this research so you can take it back to your communities and really begin to not just be in charge of your own brain, but to empower your students and the youth in your life, for parents out there, your children, that they can do this too. So I asked this question just a few moments ago. How often do you think about your brain health? I think about my dental health and the appointment that I canceled last week because I have overwhelming levels of oral anxiety. I'm a speech pathologist. Why is this? How often do we think about our heart health? How often do we go to the doctor for a wellness exam? When was the last time that any of those medical care providers asked you about your brain? The answer is not very frequently. And so what we want to do is we want to change that conversation so that when you go into the doctor's office, when you come into the counselor's office at school, that we're talking about our brain health. What does that mean? How does that work? What is your brain doing today? Our director, Dr. Sandy Chapman at the Center for Brain Health, was quoted to say that the human mind is the most beautiful and creative force on the planet. It's our job to nurture and protect and restore our brain health. It's our most precious resource. One of my colleagues on their signature, they say, without brain health, there is no health. It's kind of true when we really sit back and think about what is driving our decisions, our actions, our emotions. It's all coming from our brain. Well, now, let's talk about that teenage brain. Our teenage brains are under reconstruction. right? You may have heard this saying, neurons that fire together, wire together. And so we've talked about how during adolescence, the brain goes through this pruning stage where it's getting rid of connections that we don't need and solidifying and strengthening those that we do. And this is a gradual process. It doesn't happen overnight. And as it's happening, we're increasing the oxygen and the blood flow that is going to this precious resource so that we can be strong, social decision makers. When that process is interrupted, if there is a barrier, and it could be psychological, it could be emotional, it could be cognitive, barriers come in all shapes and sizes. But what happens when we start to feel different? Different from everybody else. Maybe we have a differently wired brain. And so the way that we see the world, the way that we perceive how it's happening around us, doesn't seem to match up with maybe our peers, definitely doesn't match up with our parents because they're so busy telling us about what it was like when they were young. But I don't live now the way that you did then. So how can we come together to understand this? When this confusion starts to set in, we start to feel detached, lonely, isolated. And so what's happening out there, over 2/3 of our 11 to 17-year-olds are stressing themselves out, right? Their brains are under fire, not just reconstruction. So why is this happening? It's one of our greatest public health challenges of our time. And going back to trying to figure out, okay, is it because of this, or this? This is what we're left with. So we have to ask some questions. Why are kids feeling lonely? Lonely is a big, broad term, right? So some of our youth are feeling lonely because they feel left out, almost 50%. 43% feel like the relationships that they do have just aren't meaningful enough. We've got isolation happening. This is the one that breaks my heart almost the most. Youth that feel like people just don't get them. You don't get it. You don't understand. You've never understood. I know that I've been in the receiving end of that many, many times as a parent, as an educator. Just the other night, Mom, you don't get it. Let me come back. Let me focus. Let me take that breath. And let me reconnect with you. Okay, I don't get it. Can you help me? Asking those questions are so important. So, biggest question of all, what is my brain telling me right now if I'm feeling lonely and isolated and not connected? Well, this is something that I hear a lot from the youth that we work with. There's annoyances everywhere, and you keep telling me to ignore them, and I cannot just ignore them. Who here feels like they can just ignore it when someone is doing something annoying at a table next to them? It's one of the hardest cognitive skills to learn, and it's one of the latest for our brain to develop. So we're kind of, again, in this construction zone trying to figure out, how do I do this? Another thing that I hear a lot is, I can't unsee the drama around me. Everybody is just so dramaful, and you're telling me just to let it go and move on. But who's telling them how? How do we let that go? That's where all of you come into play. We have to help our students and our children understand how, because if we just tell them the what, they'll never do it on their own. I wish someone would care or even notice. Oh, that's a tough one. I think we're all noticing. We wouldn't be here today if we didn't notice. And I think that we all deeply care. But how do we let them know that I see you, I hear you, I respect you, and I want to be there for you? Tell me how. You're going to hear the word how come up a lot as I talk today. I just want to go back to sleep. I'm already tired, guys. How long have I been talking for? I'm exhausted. Emotional energy is depleting. We're going to talk later today about how to refill those buckets when we feel like we're just running on empty. And this isn't just for our kids. It's for every single brain and person that's in this room and out there at home or virtually, wherever you might be today. Does that person's voice have to be so high-pitched? What's wrong with them? We hear over and over and over again, especially from a certain type of student, that voices set them off. And they're not going to go up to you and tell you, can you change your voice? That's kind of unrealistic. But instead, they might wear their hoodie in class. You might see them with their earbuds in, even though they know the rule is, you can't do that when I'm teaching. They might kind of just set their head just right on their arm to kind of block out some of that sound. Now, there's a million reasons why your students might be doing those 3 examples, but have you ever thought about, is my voice contributing to this? Now, I'm not saying that you need to change your voice, but can we ask ourselves, is there something that I could do to help make the sound not so annoying? It's kind of a full circle. It comes back to that being annoyed. And then here we go. It is not even 10 a.m. I still have 6 more hours of this. This is my son to a T, right? It doesn't matter what we're doing. It could be school, it could be a wrestling tournament, it could be him doing the thing that he loves the most in the world, snuggling with his cats. But the day feels like an eternity. And then one day turns into another day, turns into your freshman year, turns into your senior year, turns into, oh my God, what comes next? And we start catastrophizing and we start existentially questioning, what is my purpose? Who am I connected to? And why am I here? Our teenagers are asking themselves these questions. If you're lucky, they might start to ask you. So let's turn it back to brain health for a minute. We've got some harmful things that we can do to our brains, and we've got some helpful things that we can do to our brains. And what happens again when we're feeling this cognitive fog and like the world is moving in slow motion, it's going to take an eternity to get through that day, is our thoughts are the first thing to go poof, right? Oh my gosh, if I have to come up with one more, if I have to grade one more, if I have to have one more. I found myself saying this last week, if one more thing gets added to my calendar next week, I'm not going. I don't care who it is, I don't care what it is, I can't. Ew, that is not a brain healthy perspective or a good feeling place to be. So we have to figure out, how can we find the balance? Well, I know that if I do this set of things, that it's not filling my bucket and it is depleting not just my emotional energy, but also my mental and cognitive energy. And if I do things in this bucket, it's supposed to make me feel better. But when am I supposed to have the time to do the things that are in this bucket? Because this bucket is so full, right? And so the cycle just continues. Well, the cycle doesn't have to just continue. There are things that we can do to help give us that cognitive capacity to be our best selves, to show up when we need to, and to, yes, click accept when that extra meeting comes through. But before we do that, we have to help ourselves. I love this image. When I go home at the end of my day, and I usually walk in around 6-ish, I find my daughter, and I go and I give her a big hug, and I take a breath. And I often realize that that is the first intentional breath that I've taken for the day at 6 p.m. That did not help me from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. It helped me in that moment, and it helped me feel connected, but I was not taking care of myself the way that I should have throughout the day. And so that's what we want to talk about next. How can we do this? Number one, multitasking. Does this help or hurt your brain health and performance? What do you guys think? Raise your hand if you think that it helps. Multitasking is good for your brain. All right, we've got some hands in the room. All right, well, like any good neuroscientist, we're going to do an experiment. Okay, so everybody make sure that you have your hands ready because we're going to get moving. Single tasking, this is doing one thing at a time, and we're going to try it out. This is what we call field research. So what we're going to do is I would like you to take your right hand only, and for the next 15 seconds, you're just going to do good old rock, paper, scissors. Dun, dun, rock, dun, dun, paper, dun, dun, scissors. Just as a model in case anyone forgot. Okay? I'm going to set a 15-second timer, and I would like you to start now. Dun, dun, rock, dun, dun, paper, dun, dun, scissors. You can do it in any order you want. Mix it up. I don't care. You're just single tasking away. You've got about 4 seconds left. You're not even really thinking about what you're doing anymore, and you can stop. Our brains kind of went on autopilot a little bit there, right? Were you making a decision each time to choose, oh, I'm going to do rock now. I'm going to do paper now. Or did your body just kind of take over? I know my body just kind of took over. We call that autopilot. That is not good for your brain. Task switching, okay? So now I'd like you to pat your tummy and snap your fingers. Left hand only, and we're going to do this for 15 seconds. Get ready. Get set. And go. Pat, snap, left hands I see going. We're in a routine. I can do this. 2 different things. Pat, snap, snap. And you all did it. Awesome. All right. Now, I'm going to introduce a third variable. Now, I would like you to do rock, paper, scissors with one hand and do pat, snap with your other. We're going to do this for 15 seconds, and I'd like to see how you do. On your mark, get set, and go. How you guys doing? Oh, I got a drum player over here. Awesome. Okay, I see 2 hands patting and snapping. I don't know what's happening there. All right, time. So there's the end of our experiment. What I asked you to do this last time was multitasking. 2 different things with different goals, and you're trying to do them at the same time. Your brain does not like that. It says, wait a minute, What am I supposed to be focusing on? Which one am I supposed to be doing? There's too many steps involved to be able to effectively task switch, which is what we were doing here. And I certainly can't go on autopilot because there's just way too much happening. So we know that multitasking is not good for our brain. What we also know is it takes 20 minutes. 20 minutes to do what? 20 minutes to refocus our attention after we get distracted. How's that work for your 45-minute periods? Not very good, huh? Right? And it doesn't matter what the distraction is. It doesn't matter how severe the distraction is. It doesn't matter if it's an internal distraction or an external distraction, if it's a thought or a sight. 20 minutes in order for our brain to strategically refocus on what's most important. We call this strategic attention. It's hard. We're asking so much of our brains all day long because I know every single one of you, me included, we are multitasking. We have to. So if we know that, well, the job kind of requires it, I have to multitask, what are we going to do to reset our brains so that they don't get all wiggity-woggity and you're snapping and patting with both hands, right? Well, one strategy is the power of none. I like to think of this as being kind to your mind. It gives you a moment to have zero effort, not zero thought. And I like to think of this as a 5 by 5. Can everybody say that? 5 by 5. Excellent. So 5 minutes, 5 times a day. I will tell you, you do not want to take your 5 minutes, add them up, 5 times 5 is 25, and put them all together in one 25-minute chunk. That's not what we're talking about. We want to take 5 minutes, 5 separate times a day to recharge. And when we do this, it can be as simple as grabbing a cup of coffee and just staying still. Finding that safe place, that little corner that you know a student's not going to come into. For me at home, it's my bathroom, because as a parent, that's probably the only space that I have where kids know you don't want to go there. But some place where I can just chill. I leave my phone in a different room. I leave my mental to-do list away. And I try my very best to be mindful of where my brain is going during these 5 minutes. And it's going to take practice. That first time that you take these 5 minutes, the to-do list is going to happen. The wondering about what's going to happen next is going to happen. But I encourage you to breathe and focus back on your breath. And that can really help you refocus and regenerate so that your brain can feel more revitalized at the end of your day. It's not easy, guys, but it's worth it. If you try and you find yourself thinking of a million things, that's okay. You're going to have another 5 minutes in your day somewhere. Oftentimes when I'm driving, I will get home and I'll take my 5 minutes right before I go in the house. I'm in my garage, I've turned the car off, the stereo is off, and I'm just sitting in silence. It's a lovely thing if you can find time to do it. But what I'm saying is make time to do it. The time is never going to find you, right? So we want to try and make the time. Think about your day, think about your transitions. When can you get this 5 minutes to let your brain do what it's meant to do? When can you take 5 minutes, 5 times a day, to be kind to your mind? It's going to be different for all of us. Okay, another way that we can boost our brain power is through connection. So a lot of times we have to think about when a relationship isn't necessarily going the way we want it, or the connection that we have with someone isn't quite as strong, maybe, as we would want or as they would want, but there's some sort of mishap that's happening. And so we have to figure out, okay, how do I navigate this relationship? There's that word how again. How do I do this? Well, we've got 3 ways that I'm hoping will be helpful in figuring out how can I tap into my social brain power in order to increase my overall resiliency, but then also to help fill that bucket that's been depleted at the end of the day. So we have brain hack number 1. Brain hack number 1 is do something new. In order to do this, you might have to step outside of your comfort zone. The reason that doing something new is a brain hack is because, again, our brains like to go on autopilot. They like routine. They like to do the same thing over and over and over again. But that's not filling our bucket. So if we can think of one teeny tiny thing that you could do that's new. How excited do we get when Netflix releases a new series that we can binge? Right? We're like, oh, yes, that's happening. I can't wait. Because it's something new. Now, I love my Law and Order, and I've watched all 20 seasons. But there's a time and place, right? And so doing something new can be as small as finding a new TV show, as picking up a new habit or a new hobby, or it could be as grand as traveling somewhere that you've never been before, meeting new people, exposing yourself to an art that maybe you've never thought that you would like. Creativity promotes neuroplasticity. The more creative we are, the more connections we create, not only in our brain, but with each other. So doing something new is all about creating a focus. And when we create that focus, then we can be grateful for the new experience, we can be creative in the way that we approach something, and we can be mindful of what did that do for me? How did that make me feel after I did that? Wow, not too long ago, and life happens, right? Life happens, we forget things. I forgot that I love to sew. Like I did it all through college, I was in the costume design department at school. I made my wedding dress. But over the last 18 years, I'm glad my husband's not watching, over the last 18 years, I kind of forgot that I loved sewing. You know who reminded me that I love sewing? My 10-year-old daughter. She says, Mom, you made your wedding dress, but you've never made me a single thing. Oh man, talk about mom fail. I'm sorry, honey, I kind of forgot. I forgot what fills my bucket, what brings me joy. And part of that is about falling into routines, falling into these habits, and just not even thinking about it. So I challenge you guys to do something new this week. The second brain hack is connectedness. You want to enhance your existing relationships or forge new ones, right? So I'm totally dating myself here. I remember when AOL, dial-up, long wait for my inbox to load, and then ping, I got a new email. Oh my gosh, I was excited, y'all. I was like, somebody wants to talk to me? That hasn't really changed now, but now it's just Facebook notifications, it's Insta likes, it's new stories in Snapchat. Social media is here. It does have an impact on the brain, but it's not what it is, it's how we use it. So how are we using our social media connections? Are we using it to learn about new things? Are we using it to enhance existing relationships? If so, awesome. If not, think about their purpose. What is the function? I know that a lot of us, me included, I told my daughter the other day, I said, I don't like the way you're talking to your friends in Snapchat. I'm gonna just delete it. How's she ever gonna learn the right way if I just delete the app and pretend it doesn't exist? I can't really do that. And so it's how do we work within the systems, within the softwares, within the tools that we have so that, again, they can bring us positivity, joy, and connection. Again, it's going to be different for everyone. The last one, compassion. When I think about compassion, it's really empathy in action. And so there's steps to this, and it's a process. The first step is watching. We have to notice. Remember that dude with the hoodie? I wish people would care or even notice. We have to monitor what's happening around us. And then consider, how can I adapt in this moment? Not what should they do, what would they do, what could they do, but how can I? How can I do something differently right now? When I ask myself that question, I am automatically shifting perspective. Your brains love to consider multiple perspectives. It's not easy, but they love to do it. And when you nourish your brain and you shift perspectives and consider multiple possibilities, we call it possibility thinking, it opens up a whole new world, right? The lenses in our glasses literally change. And when we do that, then we can support and empathize. Many of us, and this is so very common, many of us jump to step number 3. We are the supporters, and I empathize with you. I understand, I get it, I know what you're going through. Remember that guy with the hoodie at the very beginning? One of his thoughts was, nobody gets me, they don't get it. So even though we think that we support and empathize, sometimes we want to take a couple steps back and go back to noticing what's really happening. That then will allow us to tap into the power of all of our brain, right? And when we do that, we can reflect, we can analyze, we can reframe and think about something in a new way, a different way. And this will help us show up as a more compassionate listener, a more compassionate communicator, and it will really help us come across as though we get them. And ultimately, isn't that why we're here? Because we want to get them. We want to understand, we want to know, we want to help. So here's 3 ways that you can help yourself. You can take it back to your students, to your homes. You can help those that you care for. Do that brain health checkup. Ask yourself, ask your students, how's your brain doing today? Are you just feeling tapped out? I know you've got this algebra test today, and the chemistry test tomorrow, and the PSATs next week. And I know that you're gonna do fine as long as you work hard. Well, sometimes working harder isn't working smarter, and we really need to take a break. Remember my son? home for that mental health day today. He's taken a break. We, unfortunately, when was the last time you tapped into a mental health day? Right? I have like 500 something vacation days stored up. Yeah, I don't always practice what I preach, but I'm trying to get better. That's all I'm asking. Let's just try to get a little bit better. So work on those 5 brain breaks 5 times a day. See if you can't plan them out. Put them in that agenda. Give yourself notification. Do your best. And always remember that our brain learns best when we make mistakes. Isn't that what we tell our students? It's true. So it's okay to fail. I'm a foster child. I come from a biological mother who has bipolar, who was depressed most of my early years, who ran her home as though it was a freight train. And I grew up never knowing which way the train was going to go. It was always going at full speed ahead. It was always intense, and I freaked out a lot. As a young girl, I shut down. I didn't know who to ask for help. I didn't know where to go, and my mom certainly wasn't the role model to help me. However, I had an amazing family notice me. I had an amazing family who said, I'm going to stop, I'm going to adapt, I'm going to bring a new child into my home, I'm going to care for that child, I'm going to understand the perspective of not just the child, but of the mother who's struggling immensely, and then I'm going to help. I'm going to do whatever I can to help. Without that family's help, I would not be here today, and I can say that with 100% confidence. Because there are many times in my life where my life was on the line, but I had that family there to support, to be compassionate, to understand that this world is not always nice. And when things get scary, they would always be there to help. Fred Rogers, right? Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I didn't even know this man existed until I was about 10, and then he became my mentor for life. I never give a talk without giving a shout out to Fred. He accepted me through the TV, and I felt heard, I felt noticed, I felt seen. That's why we're here today. So for all the helpers in the room, I would love it if you stood up. Everyone stand up. You are all helpers. You are a teacher, you're a parent, you're a family member, you're a clinician. You are here supporting this event today in whatever capacity you are. And I want you to put your arms around yourselves. Ooh, I should not do that. And squeeze. And say thank you. Thank you, me. Thank you for showing up today. And now give yourself a little pat on the back. And give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you so much for coming today. I have no idea what time it is, but I think I'm probably at about time. Thank you. And I can do questions if anybody has any.
Thank you so much, Maria. I think we have some time for a few questions, if anyone would like to, and we have our microphone people.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, I'm going to see if I can.
We're going to get y'all roller skates next year.
Hi, and thank you for all your information. It was very nice. I have a question. You were telling us when we were doing the activity of the hand tapping the stomach and doing the other hand, the brain cannot do it. But what about when you speak two languages?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question.
Because I am bilingual, so, and it's like when I'm listening to English, then my brain instantly translates.
It's translating and then
Yes.
speaking, right? So the question is, how does our brain process two languages at once? And then how do we shift back and forth between the two in the moment? When are you ever speaking Spanish and English at the same time, or whatever language it is? I'm sorry. No, at the same time. In your brain, right. But when we speak it, what happens is that we single task, just like that. It's automatic, right? We might be thinking of it, okay, I'm translating. That's the cognitive process. That's always going to happen. But when you do the doing, you single task. I'm now saying it. I've already made that cognitive choice that it's going to come out in this word. What we see in language development oftentimes with kids with dual languages is that they'll use both languages as they're learning one or the other. And that's the brain not quite being able to make that distinction yet. It hasn't figured out, how am I going to single task? So that's a great question. Language, we could talk for hours. But I think that when you think about how it's coming out as one language. So you're single tasking. Absolutely. Any other questions? No? Okay, fantastic.
I think there's one
Oh,
more.
is there one more? Sorry.
Can't see for the lights.
Hey, with the 5x5 tactic that you mentioned earlier, would you suggest scheduling that out like rigidly, or would you suggest it more kind of throughout the day, I really need a break?
Yeah, so I always say schedule first.
Okay.
Right? So let's be intentional about it. Because if we're not, the reality is it's not going to happen. So as we become more adaptable and more flexible, then it will start to feel more natural, and our body will start to give us the cues, our brain will give us the cue that, oh, I think I need to take my 5 minutes right now and not at 2:15 when I've scheduled it. But you'll start to recognize that your brain will give you those cues because you're going to become more aware of when you're feeling overloaded, overwhelmed, and overtaxed, and then you'll be able to exercise that right to take that 5 minutes.
I love that idea.
Yes.
It's good. Anyone else?
I don't see any.
Okay. Thank you all. And Maria, thank you so much. That was just so
Absolutely.
enlightening and full of wonderful wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, I hope that you found today to be an enlightening and educational conference. That was our intent, and I certainly learned a lot, so I hope that you did too. Before you go, we'd like to ask you to find the evaluation form in your packet and just take a moment to answer the very few questions on there. And this is really helpful to us as we plan future events so that we can get your input and design these future events to address the topics that are the most important to you. Someone will be at the door to collect those on your way out, so just please take a minute to do that. If you're with us online, you'll receive an email shortly with a link to that online survey, and we'd love your feedback. There is also a QR code. Here it is. You can, point your phone, your camera at that, and that will bring up the survey for you. So feel free to do that to get this evaluation form. It's really important to us, so thank you very much. If you signed up for CEU credits, you can turn in your CEU evaluation form. That's a whole different thing. And pick up your certificate at the CEU table in the back of the room. If you're joining us virtually, please fill out the online CEU evaluation, and your CEU certificate will be mailed to you next Wednesday, October 6th. That's a separate evaluation form. Thank you again to Medical City, Green Oaks Hospital for providing those CEU credits for this conference. We appreciate that so much. And we want to say thanks to the many volunteers that